The real problem with Sweet Baby Inc. is that it exists in the first place. Let me explain. I was recently reading a thread on Reddit on r slash out of the loop, and it really explained the whole situation in a pretty balanced way. I'm gonna read you several of the original post and several of the comments, and then we'll discuss my feelings on the whole situation. And I wasn't going to make a video on this because, quite honestly, I like to stay out of all of the, social justice drama and stuff like that because it usually blows back on me. But this time, I'm just getting really ticked off with all of this stuff that's going on, and it's not exclusively video games. Obviously, this has been going on in Hollywood for a long time as well. Honestly, since about 2016, when the world just sort of turned on its head. And, I thought all of this was going to blow over in 3 or 4 years, but it just hasn't. All of these companies, these major media corporations, your Disneys and your Warner Brothers, and in gaming, your EAs and your Ubisofts, they just keep doubling down and doubling down after failure after failure after failure. And I don't really understand where they're getting the money for, all of these agendas that are causing failures left, right, and center. But let's look at this Reddit thread. User Finnick asks, what's going on with the Sweet Baby Inc. controversy? He says, I'm not really into the AAA gaming sphere, the multiplayer indie games, but I've been hearing a lot of drama about Sweet Baby Inc. and even some people calling it Gamergate 2.0. I'm just confused about what it's about. It's probably obvious and I'm just stupid. Kind of feel the same way. I've watched a couple of videos here and there, RGT85, Smash JT talking about Sweet Baby Inc. I didn't really understand. I knew there was some kind of SJW something going on, but answer here to quote user Osfall, who left one of a few excellent answers when I asked about the same thing. Sweet Baby is a story writing company hired to supplement video game studios' writing staff. The idea is that a studio can hire them to flesh out a game's script and storyline. The company is transparent about their goals of approaching writing with a focus on representation and marginalized groups. Well, that doesn't sound terrible off the top. For a growing number of players, though, this is a dog whistle for the unwanted insertion of political ideologies or other topics that they aren't interested in. In other words, a distraction from what really matters, making a good game. You can easily find examples of all of these sorts of people on social media. Many releases, such as Suicide Squad, have had Sweet Baby credited as part of their writing staff, and these games have been a major disappointment to many players. A Sweet Baby credit is now being thought of like leprosy and an indicator of games to avoid. I kind of come down in the middle on a lot of these things. I don't necessarily think that diversity and inclusivity equals woke, if you will. I really kind of hate the whole woke mentality. I think it's stupid to pigeonhole anything that happens to be diverse as woke. However, the company has become an easy scapegoat for the growing dissatisfaction with major releases. That same dissatisfaction with major studios has led to successes of games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Palworld, as well as Helldivers 2, as players are starting to explore other studios who are taking a different approach to their games. So an edit here, it says, it's come to my attention that Suicide Squad is the only notable game Sweet Baby was involved with to be considered a critical disappointment. Additionally, going to include another answer from Bongo1138 that was also posted in my thread on this. Answer, while I don't know the specifics, it is fairly predictable knowing who they are and that the anti-woke crowd are attacking them. Sweet Baby Inc. is a company that video game companies consult with to ensure their product is inclusive, culturally sensitive, accurate, etc. My understanding is that they work with devs in various roles, such as simply providing guidance on scripts to apparently providing some art assets. Based on my knowledge and Suicide Squad's apparent failure, I'd reckon these anti-woke crusaders are blaming the game's problems on Sweet Baby. To add on to this, there was a Steam curation group created to call out whenever they were involved in a game. Sweet Baby did not take to this well and stated that this was harassment and that the curation group needed to be shut down. What kind of Streisand effect affected their whole deal, and it doesn't help that most of the kind of games that they were involved in ended up being games that, for the most part, had a lukewarm reception or didn't do as well as people expected them to. What was funny about this is that I honestly felt like if they just ignored the Steam curator group, it would not have gained as many members or traction as it would have. That group probably only had like 1,000 members when somebody brought it up. Now it's at like 194,000 members since that whole debacle. Even then, the owner of the curating group has said that he mostly did it to inform people that SBI had a hand in the game and that if you wanted to buy a game they were involved with or not, that was up to you. With that, I don't see how it's different compared to curators that warn users about a game using Denuvo, or if devs made a deal with Epic Games to sell their PC game on their storefront for an exclusive time window before being sold on Steam. I would get it if the curator said, don't buy this game because the protagonist is gay, black, etc., but all of a sudden all they say is SBI worked on this game, source their website, which isn't harassment. And then, unfortunately, somebody replies, the curator tags all games with SBI involvement as not recommended instead of informational, so the intent to dissuade purchase seems pretty clear. I agree that this isn't really harassment, though. Alright, so let's talk about this for a bit. As I stated, I'm pretty up the middle. I would not consider myself to be part of the anti-woke crowd, necessarily. I'm a fairly liberal person in general. However, I really object in all of my media, and I have been objecting in all of my media for quite some time to any kind of a corporate agenda being pushed into my media. That is not to say that I don't want politics in my stories, because a lot of my favorite pieces of media are absolutely politics. Star Trek, for example, is absolutely full of wonderful politics and the idea that man can become more than he currently is, and that in the future we will have overcome racism and bigotry, and we can have women as leaders and black people as leaders and gay people as leaders, and look at all of these different diverse types of people as equal and as one race, all humans and all worthy of respect. And I absolutely believe that. Star Trek is my favorite show, and I have been indoctrinated by Star Trek since like the 60s. Well, I wasn't around in the 60s, but I was watching the original show for, in reruns, and saw the famous interracial kiss between Uhura and Kirk. And, none of that even registered in my child mind, because as a child, you don't really think that anything is wrong until somebody tells you that something is wrong. Racism is a learned behavior, something that is taught to you by other racists. And that goes the same for any form of bigotry. That is something that you are taught by people who came before you, who are maybe unused to the way that things are moving forward into the future. But that being said, I feel like racism and bigotry, all of this anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-feminist, all of this stuff that comes under that blanket of SJW has gotten worse over the last 10-ish years, not better. For all the crusading that all of these different marginalized groups are doing, since, there was a turning point in about 2016 with that female-led Ghostbusters movie which just absolutely flopped and turned the internet on fire because people were expecting one thing and they got completely another. They got female Ghostbusters, they got black Ghostbusters, they got, it wasn't what people were expecting, and that flipped a switch in the entire anti-woke community. It basically created the anti-woke community overnight. The problem is with most of the anti-woke community is that they are indiscriminate in their discrimination. And I have no problem with a woman being a lead in a movie. Some of the greatest movies ever had fantastic women leads in them. And I didn't even have a problem with, the character of Rey in the Disney Star Wars movie. I thought she was fantastic. But there was a lot about her character that was objectionable. The fact that she could step in to, Han Solo's shoes and pilot the Millennium Falcon better than he did, without any training, without any experience whatsoever. The fact that she could just step in and show up the middle-aged white man, for example, I can see why people were upset about that. If Rey had a character development arc similar to Luke Skywalker, where she had to go to some planet and train with Yoda for presumably months to become a Jedi or something like that, or if she went through a war for months or years and gained the skills of piloting ships and this and that and the other thing, we wouldn't have resented the fact that she was a strong female. But that whole characteristic of a character just stepping into abilities that other people worked for is called a Mary Sue. And, that really offends a lot of people because it's a bait and switch sort of situation. It's an agenda where, these creators of these properties are dropping these characters in, whether they be female or whatever color of the rainbow or gay or whatever. They drop these characters in and they make them better than the people that came before without those characters having earned our trust as the viewers. And that's the real problem with Sweet Baby Inc. Their entire existence is there to bait and switch people, to drop in these inclusivity characters. And I want to hear stories from other people. I want to hear gay stories. I want to hear trans stories. I want to feel what these people are going through and see their perspectives, but I don't want that forced down my throat. I don't want these things put in places where they don't belong. You need to tell your own story. When you take a character like Iron Man and replace him with a teenage black girl in college or whatever, that throws people off because Iron Man is Iron Man, right? Of course, they haven't done that in the movies. That was something they did in the comics a few years ago. But the idea that you can just take an existing character and just throw that to the side and put in some kind of inclusivity character, and we're all supposed to be like, yeah, that's awesome, black girl Iron Man, that's so cool. I want these people to have the representation that they deserve. We all deserve to have the same access to opportunities as everyone else. But I don't want someone in a corporate boardroom or some kind of consultancy firm trying to teach me about the world. And, when I sit down to play a video game, I want to enjoy that video game for what it has to offer. The story, the gameplay, whatever. And I want that to be the artist's vision. And this is why Japanese games are so much better right now than Western-focused games. Because in Japan, they don't worry about any of this stuff. They just tell the story that they want to tell, whether it's the late Akira Toriyama or whatever. They color the characters the way they vision the characters to be. They tell the story that they want to tell. And if that story happens to have a black character, like Barret in Final Fantasy VII or something, fine. Nobody thought twice about it because that is the story they wanted to tell. And if you come into game development or making a movie from the perspective of a casting director with a clipboard that has to check off all of these different prerequisites. Okay, we've got our gay character. Okay, we've got our black character. Okay, we've got our Latino character. Check, 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 check. Okay, we've got the strong female lead. Check. What you're doing is you're building a movie or a video game based on a formula that comes out of a spreadsheet that says a certain percentage has to be this, and a certain percentage has to be that, and a certain amount of screen time has to be given to this minority or that minority. And what you're doing is you're not making a movie anymore. You're making propaganda. And again, I'm a pretty up the middle person in terms of wanting to see everyone have their chance to shine, but I'm not interested in watching propaganda. More and more and more these days, I'm going back and watching older movies from the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s because they weren't saddled with all of this political nonsense. Sure, there may have been political ideals inserted in the movies, but those were the ideals of the writers and the directors making the movie, not some boardroom full of consultants who were checking off a spreadsheet. And that is the real problem. The fact that and this is all about money. At the end of the day, groups like Sweet Baby Inc. exist because there is a market, because these mega corporations, the likes of your EAs and Ubisofts, have seen that in the, global landscape, they have to do these diversity things. So they are reaching out to consultancies like Sweet Baby, who exist merely because these companies want to cover their asses and make sure they don't get canceled, right? So all of Sweet Baby exists because of, quite frankly, the free market and the fact that these corporations want to reach out to groups like this to make sure that their game offends no one and that every single game that comes out fits into a specific mold. And this is why the AAA gaming landscape is completely devoid of any character or charm whatsoever, not because it's got a black person or a gay person in it. That's fine. We don't care about that. What we care about is the fact that artists are not making these games anymore. Artists are not making this stuff. Boardroom executives are making this stuff, and it has lost all of its charm. I heard the other day, one of these companies, like I think it might have been EA, actually has a vice president, not like an HR manager or something, a vice president in charge of diversity and inclusivity. Like, theoretically, an executive making presumably 6 figures plus just to be in charge of diversity and inclusivity. Like, is this really necessary? I don't understand why we can't just tell a good story. At the end of the day, could we just tell a good story? Does it matter? Everybody's ranting and raving about Stellar Blade because of, the fact that it just has a pretty girl in it. Like, oh my gosh, we've gotten to the point where it's surprising to have a pretty girl in a video game because, that might offend somebody who is less attractive or something. I'm not really sure. Anyways, guys, thanks for sitting through this rant. I hope if you don't or didn't understand what was going on with the whole Sweet Baby Inc., I hope this video helped you a little bit to understand. Sweet Baby Inc. is doing what these companies are paying them to do. At the end of the day, that's making them money, and, they're succeeding. These groups of anti-woke incels, if you will, they're not helping anything either, because they're making themselves look worse and worse and worse. And at the end of the day, you need to vote with your wallet for whatever you believe in, on whatever side of the fence you fall on. You need to just vote with your wallet, but making yourself look like an incel or whatever, that's not helping anybody. Harassing these people and running campaigns to get companies shut down or canceled or whatever, that doesn't help anyone. At the end of the day, you just need to vote with your wallet, folks. That's what really matters to these companies. And, buy the games that you know you're gonna love, and if that means you're only buying indie games, or you're only buying Japanese or Chinese-based games or things like that from parts of the world that have different social values that may be more aligned with yours or whatever, just vote with your wallet. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Stay classy.